You read the title of the video correctly. I did, in fact, quit art for a year. Art has been a part of my life for a long time, so this wasn't a decision I'd made on purpose. Life changed really fast, and at some point, I realized I just wasn't drawing anymore. Drawing and illustrating had been my entire life for a long time. It wasn't just something I liked doing, it was how I spent my days, how I supported myself during the pandemic, and how I imagined my future. I was doing commissions, making YouTube videos, posting consistently on social media, and for the first time in my life, it felt like things were finally working out for me. I was starting to make a living wage out of art, and I genuinely thought that I was finally stepping into the version of my life that I had been dreaming of for so long. But then 2022 changed everything. As some of you may know, that year I lost my mom. This was an event that changed me and my family in so many different ways. I've lost family members and friends before, but losing my mom, God, it was one of the most painful experiences of my life. And this is gonna sound so weird, but I feel like a lot of people become aware that at some point in their lives they're gonna lose their parents, that it's something that is gonna happen. But in my case, I thought it would happen when I was finally settling down, something that was going to happen when I lived most of my life, not something that happened right in front of you in your 20s when you're just fresh out of college. But surprisingly, losing my mom wasn't what made me quit art. If anything, when I lost her, I knew exactly what to do. I knew I needed to give myself time to grieve, I needed to put myself through therapy, and I needed to allow myself to adjust to the way life was now. And even till that point, I was aware that it was going to be a long process, that it could even take years until life felt normal again. And at that point in time, when everything felt horrible and I couldn't see a way out, art was my only escapism. What really broke me came later, when my mental health and my physical health started falling apart at the same time. I was already dealing with depression, ADHD, and some physical health issues all at once. And to be honest, a big part of the first year after my mom passed is just kind of a big blur. I was focusing on surviving and not really paying attention to everything else. At first, I was actually handling things pretty well. I realized that I had been ignoring my physical health and that my depression was becoming too much for me to manage on my own. So I went to see a doctor. I was prescribed antidepressants, and combined with my ADHD medication, they worked really well. I was going to the gym consistently, I was following a healthy diet, and for a while everything felt good. Then, after my nutritionist asked me to get some medical studies done, she asked me to go see a gynecologist. I didn't think much of it, and then I found out that I was dealing with a really serious hormonal imbalance that needed to be treated immediately. The medication that I had to take messed up my body and my mental health so much. One of the side effects was depression, which I was already dealing with, so it just intensified everything, whether if I was medicated or not. And on top of that, no matter how much I work out or follow my diet, my weight was completely unpredictable. Some weeks I would lose a lot of weight just to gain back double the next week. And I couldn't just stop taking the medication because certain types of hormonal imbalances can lead to cancer. And that was something that I was not willing to risk. And even with all of that happening, I still didn't quit art. When I lost the energy and motivation to go to the gym, I would draw. When I ordered fast food because I didn't feel like cooking, I would use the extra time to draw. God, even when I needed money for my meds, I began going to conventions and set up an artist alley booth to sell my merch and get extra cash. Drawing became my job, my comfort, my entire world. That was the only constant in my life. And even with everything that I was already dealing with, my family dynamic began to change in the months after my mom passed away. And that was what finally tipped things over for me. It wasn't one big moment or anything like that. It was more like small changes that slowly piled up and I just couldn't cope with them. I don't blame my dad or my brother for any of it. They were grieving too, just in their own ways. But regardless of that, it still took a toll on me. Looking back, I realized that's when I stopped being fully honest in therapy. I talked about family situations and grief, but avoided how deeply everything else was affecting my mental health. Like, everything got so bad that I reached a point where I just didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to talk to anyone about it because it was just too much for me to handle on my own all at once. And yet, that wasn't what made me quit art. I was still drawing. Drawing was the only thing that I couldn't stop doing. I did enjoy it, but I was also using it to keep myself busy. Most of my energy went into commissions and making merch, and even drawings I like were tied to deadlines, expectations, and just trying to stay afloat. From the outside, I looked productive, but internally I was screaming the whole time. Because if I stopped drawing, I would not only stop making money, but I would have to think about everything: my weight, my health, my mom passing away, my depression, everything that I didn't want to think of. I just wanted peace. I just wanted to be away from everything, and drawing was the only way that I could do that. And then suddenly, in the middle of all that noise, in the middle of all that stress, I got an offer. A job opportunity I discarded a long time ago. A job that required me to step away from my current life and move away. A real chance to be away from everything. And for the first time in a long time, something felt clear. Not exciting, not dramatic, just clear. Like a pause. Like permission to stop trying to hold everything together and finally be able to breathe. And what was this job offer, you may ask? Well, it was an offer to work at Walt Disney World as a merchandise cast member for a whole year at the Mexico Pavilion in Epcot. And I know what some of you might be thinking. Did you really quit a career as an independent artist to go work customer service at a theme park? Yeah, but I had my reasons. A few years back, while I was in college, I participated in two Disney international programs that took place over the summer. Basically, the international version of the Disney College Program. If you never heard of it, you go to Florida, work for Disney, they provide housing and transportation and some other services, and you get to go to the parks for free as an employee benefit. For a lot of people, it becomes a huge part of their college experience and even their lives. For me, those two programs in 2017 and 2018 were honestly some of the best moments of my college life. But because of those programs and some family matters, I had to delay my graduation from spring 2019 to fall 2020. I was originally planning to do another program in 2019, but that would have pushed my graduation even further. So for once, I decided to be a good, responsible student. I told myself, okay, I'll focus on school, graduate in 2020, and then reward myself with one last program as a kinda gap year before entering the real adult world. And then the pandemic happened. Classes got cancelled, including the ones that I needed in order to graduate. Therefore, my graduation was delayed all the way to fall 2021. Which, fun fact, that is way later than my graduation would have been if I had just been reckless and go back to Disney in 2019. So the one time I choose to be a good student, life immediately decided to punch him in the gut. I was shoved into the adult world at a weird time where the world was shut down and without any sort of closure, and that unfinished feeling kind of stayed with me the whole time. Honestly, when I applied to the Disney program again back in 2023, I didn't think much of it. My mom had told me to apply as soon as work visas were being issued again. And when that happened, my dad encouraged me to do so. But it was more of a, if I get in, it's fine, and if I don't, that's also fine. So when I got the offer, I was a bit surprised. It had been almost a year since the interview, and I was in the last batch of people they sent the job offer to. And I guess it was a mixture of that unfinished chapter of my life and all the things that I was going through that accepting it just felt like the right thing to do. Now, I actually had to wait a long time before moving to Florida. Everything was technically moving forward, but very slowly. And during that time period, something unexpected happened. Everything around me decided to improve. My art career began growing in ways it hadn't before. I began to fully focusing on my work as an artist alley vendor, and I started traveling to events in other cities, and sometimes my friends would tag along and people began recognizing my work. I was making more money and it felt like I was building something. It felt like my art wasn't just something I was holding on to, but something that was actually making me feel happy and sustained for once. And that's when I began doubting myself. After so much uncertainty and struggle, things were finally working, and I had to ask myself whether if it made sense to leave just as things were falling into place. I had a lot of second thoughts, and I had to ask myself whether if moving forward meant leaving behind something that I worked so hard on building. But that's when I had to admit to myself that even though I was doing better financially, that didn't mean everything else was fixed. I was functional, but I wasn't well. The anxiety was still there, the burnout was still there, and the grief was still there. All these things, I've been carrying them around for so long, and they were not gone. Staying didn't feel comfortable at all, it felt overwhelming, like I was holding everything together with deadlines and distractions. So I went away. Not because it was some big inspirational leap of faith, but because I needed my space. I needed time where my entire focus wasn't on producing, surviving, or keeping things afloat. For a long time, staying productive was my way of showing everyone that I was okay, so they wouldn't worry about me. As long as I was busy creating, it looked like I was doing great. But that also meant that I never stopped long enough to fall apart, to grieve, or to actually look after myself. I realized I didn't need to keep proving others that I was okay. I just needed time to be me. I needed time to grieve without others watching, time to heal without expectations, and time to figure out who I was when I wasn't constantly creating or doing something for others. And that's when going away stopped feeling like an escape, but more like something that I needed to do. After all, it wasn't only for me, it was also for my family. I knew my grief was heavy, and I didn't want to sit in the middle of everything while we were all hurting in our own ways. Putting some distance between us felt like giving us all space to cope and to let things settle. And on a practical level, I needed safety. I needed a job that would take care of me while I healed. Something stable, predictable, something that ended when the ship ended. I couldn't handle worrying about bills, deadlines, and survival on top of everything else. Having that structure meant that I could focus on getting through the day, one step at a time, without my entire life depending on how productive or how creative I could be. That stability didn't fix everything, but it gave me the room to heal without constantly being in survival mode. And so, I said goodbye to my family and friends, to my job as an artist, and I moved away for a whole year. When I first moved to Florida, I was mostly focusing on settling in and getting used to a completely new routine. I knew those few weeks were going to be about adjusting, so I didn't put any pressure on drawing. In my head, art was something that I wasn't quitting. It was just something that I was gonna come back to when I had time and when it felt right. Suddenly, things started to feel easier. I was making new friends, reconnecting with old ones, and actually going out and doing things instead of staying home all day with my own thoughts. Given the time and place where I was, on my days off, I was going to the Disney parks or going to Universal, walking around, playing tourist, and letting myself enjoy everything. And you know that old meme from a tweet that says, going to Disney won't cure your depression, but at least I'll be depressed on Space Mountain? Yeah, that was kind of like the vibe of my first few months in Florida. It didn't fix anything per se, but it made things feel a little lighter for a while. Life was simpler and it was easier for me to be present. And without really noticing at first, art stopped being the thing I reached out for. Not because I was avoiding it, but because I felt like I was finally just living. I also want to be clear that Disney wasn't some magical cure for everything. There were still plenty of hard days. I spent a lot of time on the phone with my friends, venting about work, crying over emotional stuff, and dealing with drama that comes from being far away from home and starting over. I even got sick at one point, and that was like a really scary moment for me because if it hadn't been for a friend who was visiting from Mexico who could bring me my medication, I honestly wouldn't have been able to afford it, which Jesus Christ, America, why are you like this? Why is your healthcare system this way? Like, really? At that point, my dad was considering flying me over to Mexico for a week so I could just go and get treated and fly back to my job because that was cheaper. Explain to me how an international flight is cheaper than medicine for treating a gum infection. So, as you can see, not everything disappeared. But at the same time, without me really noticing, other things were shifting in the background. I was walking way more than I had ever before, because the parks are huge and moving around feels easier when a theme park is basically your daily walkthrough. I was getting more sunlight, and because of it, I was also drinking more water without thinking about it. All of that lined up with me finishing my treatment for my hormonal imbalance. None of these things fix everything on their own, but together, they make my days feel more manageable. I was feeling healthier. I can actually pinpoint the moment I realized that I was doing better. It was somewhere in late February. There was this family drama going on, and after I hung up on the phone with my dad, I had this very clear thought of I'm in another country, there's only so much I can do from here, and they'll have to figure out something without me. And that was it. There was still some anxiety, sure, but not enough to make me cry or shut down. For once, it didn't feel like my world was ending. It felt calm. For the first time in 2 years, I felt like a normal person. Somewhere in the middle of all of that, I didn't even realize I had stopped drawing. My days had structure, my energy was limited, and when I had free time, I usually just rest. I also knew I wasn't there forever, and I had waited so long to live this part of my life. So I didn't want to stay indoors alone drawing. If I had a day off, I wanted to be out, walking, exploring, and enjoying everything while I could still do it. Before this, I was the type of person who would take her iPad pretty much everywhere. If I was hanging out with my friends, I would be drawing. If I was commuting, I would be drawing. If I was just eating lunch on my own, I would be drawing. But suddenly my days were spent in crowded parks, on concrete, and moving constantly. The idea of dropping my iPad and watching it shatter on the ground into a bunch of really expensive tiny pieces was enough to make me want to leave it at home most of the time. I still wanted a creative outlet, and I began shifting my interest to photography for a little bit. It just fitted my lifestyle better, and I wasn't doing it with any fancy cameras. I was just trying to do my best with my iPhone and Lightroom, and you know, it was just better for the moment where I was. And without realizing it, drawing just quietly faded into the background. Being without art for a long time made me realize how much I had wrapped my identity around being the art girl or the art kid. For years, that was the easiest way to explain who I was. And without it in front of me, I had to sit down with who I was beyond what I make. I realized I'm someone who cares a lot about her loved ones, sometimes to a fault, that I am sensitive, that I cry easily, and that I feel things very intensely. I can be hot headed, I can be stubborn, especially when I'm overwhelmed and frustrated. I'm the kind of person who overthinks conversations and gets attached quickly. Someone who worries about everyone before worrying about herself. I like routines, I like long walks, I like taking photos and listening to music on repeat. I like grocery shopping, I like wearing cute outfits, riding roller coasters, I love eating sweets. None of that has anything to do with art, but it's still a part of who I am. Art didn't disappear, it just stopped being the only thing holding me together. It wasn't until March that it finally hit me. I was scrolling through my art Instagram, just checking in, and I realized the last time that I had posted a drawing was almost 5 months earlier. I went back through my camera roll and my files, expecting to find something in between, like a little sketch or a work in progress that I had forgotten of. But no, there was nothing. I was really surprised how I didn't notice it. And honestly, by that point, a lot of things began stabilizing in my life. My health issues were minimal to none, and my family was finally adjusting to life without my mom. Life felt like I actually had the mental space for art again. And I felt an urge to be creative, to just draw and do something that I was going to be proud of. But I also knew I was not ready to turn it into my job again. I wasn't ready for deadlines. I wasn't ready for art to pay the bills. I just wanted to let it exist quietly on my own terms without any pressure. And so I started drawing again, but in the smallest, quietest way possible. Just sketches, simple drawings, things that I didn't need to finish or polish. And honestly, it felt really good. I wasn't thinking about what fandom would get more traction or whether a piece would perform well on Instagram or if it was just good enough to justify the time I spent on it. If I liked it, I posted. If I didn't, that was also fine. Going back was honestly kind of fun, but messy because a sketch that used to take me maybe 30 minutes suddenly turned into a 3 hour commitment. My lines were super shaky, and somehow the way I drew feet and hands looked worse, if that's even possible. It was a really humbling experience to say the least. But you know what? Even with all of it, I loved it. On days when I felt bored, I would draw. Not because I should, but because it just sounded nice. I started taking my iPad and my sketchbook to work, so instead of dissociating in the break room or doom scrolling while I was on lunch, I would just sketch a little. Just nothing serious, just something for practice. On rainy days when I didn't want to deal with the weather, I stayed in and draw instead. No pressure to finish anything, no plan for what I needed to do, just doing it again. That's when it hit me. I didn't need art as a form of escapism. I just needed art to be a part of my life. Sometimes for work, and sometimes for fun. Not something I disappeared into to avoid everything else. Just something that existed alongside me. During the last third of my program, I had a few friends to come over and visit me, some from other cities and some all the way from Mexico. And more than once, they told me I look happy, that I look brighter. At first, I didn't really know what to do with that because from the inside, it didn't feel like a huge transformation. But hearing it from them made me realize that something had shifted. I wasn't constantly tense or running on fumes or trying to hold everything. I just felt like myself. And that was the thing. I finally felt like myself again. As the year was coming to an end, I started feeling that pull again. Not just to draw, but to start treating art as a job, at least for a little bit. I kind of miss the structure, the discipline, and the idea of having something to prepare for. So, in order to keep myself accountable, I booked two conventions. Kinda in a way of forcing myself back into work mode and seeing if I was able to handle it. As I was preparing to get back to Mexico, I realized how much I missed my old life. And that's when it hit me. I had finally closed the cycle that I've been carrying with me for so long with Disney. I felt some peace that I never felt before, and even though I still had a few months left on my contract, my mind was already moving forward. But even so, I decided to stay and finish my contract. I had only 2 months left, and my birthday was coming up, and let me tell you, I love spending my birthday at Disney. It's something I wouldn't trade for anything. I also went to a convention and met half the cast of my favorite show, and I don't know, just going to cons in general and seeing the artist alley and seeing all the merch, seeing people, it made me realize how much I missed being in the other side of the table. But I did appreciate it being an attendee for a while and not having to work at an event every time I was there. So every day after work, I would just start drawing and planning my merch, and I was really excited. Art made its way back into my life, and I was finally ready to accept it. When my program came to an end, I cried a lot. I was gonna miss my friends, and I was gonna miss seeing them every day at work. I was also gonna miss walking and playing around the parks, and those nights where if I felt down, I could just go and watch fireworks to cheer myself up. Letting go of that life wasn't easy. But what surprised me was that underneath it all, I didn't feel sad. I felt ready. The tears were real, but they weren't coming from sadness or fear. They were just a part of saying goodbye. And when I got to the airport, I wasn't anxious or scared. I was excited. I was happy and ready to move forward. I've been back in Mexico for about 5 months now, and I've worked a few events ever since. And honestly, I've never felt happier in my life. Things aren't easy. I'm still getting the hang of it and relearning how to structure my time and make decisions and hold myself accountable without burning out. That part's still a work in progress. But even with that, I'm genuinely happy to be slowly building a career in art again. This time it feels different. It's not rushed, it's not coming from panic or pressure, it's something that I'm choosing to do. Going away didn't change my relationship with art overnight, but it gave me the space to rebuild it into something that doesn't have to carry me alone anymore. I feel like sometimes we creatives really antagonize the 9 to 5s or anything that looks like a regular job. But what helped me wasn't the job itself, it was the structure. Having something that gave my day shape and that told my brain when to start and when to stop. And I think that's what I learned from all of it. I know not everyone can disappear or make some huge dramatic change in their lives. I know what I did was a huge privilege as well. If art begins to feel heavy to you just like it did to me, it's okay to step back and to let something else hold you for a while. It could be a job, it could be school, or even a new hobby, just anything that can give you the space to breathe. Creativity won't leave you, it'll wait, and when you're ready, it'll still be there. Hi, it's been a while. I hope you guys liked the video, and I guess this kind of explains my 2 year absence. Life got loud, and I just needed some quiet. If you related to any part of this video, please let me know in the comments. I hope I helped you feel less alone. Honestly, that's all I wanted from this. I'm still figuring out what I want to do with this channel. I still love speed paints and redesigns, but I also want to try other things and see what feels right. So I'm just gonna take it one step at a time. If you want to stick around, you can maybe like this video and consider subscribing to the channel. And if you want to see more of my art, you can also follow me on Instagram at It's Princess Rosa or clicking the link in the description. Thank you for being here, and for those who stay along all this time, thank you so much for waiting. It really means a lot to me. And I'll see you in the next video. Love you all. Bye!